Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm Ross Birkbeck from Casedo. Hopefully you can hear and see me. I'm Ross Birkbeck. I'm a barrister at Old Square Tax Chambers and the founder and broadly inventor of Casedo. I'm here today with Gizem Akilli, who is a student at City Law School. And today we're going to hopefully show you Casedo and what it can do in a student context. Excuse me, there's a few more people joining us. Hopefully, as I said, hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can also see a chat box, or you can open up the chat box for text. The way this I think is going to work is Gizem's here with a, she's going to grill me on Casedo and from a student perspective, and I'm going to hopefully be able to answer her questions about what it can do for her and different ways to use it for students. And what we obviously this is designed to be, two-way. Any questions, put them in the chat box there and send a message to Gizem, and she can feed those through to me. And hopefully that way we'll keep it organized. There'll be a question and answer at the end, so you'll have another opportunity at the end to ask specific questions. But if you, when I'm talking anything you're unsure of, anything you want to push into a bit further, send Gizem a question, and she'll ask me on top of all the other things she's got. Hopefully I'm going to be keeping up with this. A bit of a background about me. I'm a practicing barrister at Old Square Tax Chamber, so I do tax law for my sins. I have therefore a mixed practice. I'm not in court a huge amount. I do a lot of desk-based work, a lot of analysis and research. I came to Casedo, I came to the bar about 5 years ago now, having previously been a video editor and filmmaker. And that was a job and an industry really that is completely paperless. And so I hadn't really worked with paper since university, 10 years before that. And moving to, whilst I was at law school, in fact, I was immediately confronted with paper for the first time in a long time. And I didn't like it. It's heavy. I can't read my own handwriting. I lose it. It's a disaster for me, paper. And as I said, I'd previously been working for a long time in video, where I had tools to manipulate very easily huge amounts of data, like terabytes and terabytes. So I did a lot of documentary work, but you have vast whole hard drives full of thousands of video files, and the tools were there for me to throw this stuff around very easily, do all sorts of things with it. And broadly, one tool could do everything you need to do with video can nowadays be done, in Final Cut Pro. Or its competitors. So when I moved to law school, and I was, sent my first assignments, particularly at bar school, and I was given sort of 12 PDFs and told to sort of, draft an opinion, write an essay about a particular area. I found it bizarre that there was no way to easily handle all these different digital documents on my computer and to move between them swiftly. And that frustration as a student is really what led me to perhaps recklessly found a software startup on the side of my practice at the bar and produce some software. But there we are. I'm through probably the hard bit. We've now got a piece of working software. There's a lot more to do on it, but we've got some working software, and I use it all today. I completely rely on it for my practice now, and we've got a growing community of barristers, and lawyers, and litigators who use it too. So, but all that is really a way of me saying to you that I definitely see Casedo as an asset for students too, because that's how I invented it. I see a couple more people joining us. Let me let. So, with that background out the way, I'm going to hand over to Gizem, and she can grill me, hopefully not too hard, on the questions she's prepared. Gizem.
Hi everyone, I'm Gizem Akilli. I'm a student at City University, about to commence my studies in LPC and BPP. Well, today, thanks to Ross, I joined him to ask him a couple of questions on Casedo. So my first question is, what is Casedo? And yeah, what is Casedo actually?
Well, what we're here to do is see it. So let me jump into the screen share, and we can cut straight to that. Here we go. Hopefully that will open up the screen share. I'm just going to bring back my tools. Do let me know, or just let me know if you can't see or hear that. This is my desktop, my second screen, so my eyes are, I'm afraid, going to be diverted whilst I'm talking about this. Here is Casedo. And what it is first and foremost, is a very simple app to replace the ring binder, the A4 ring binder that most lawyers know and love or hate. And you can see here, we've got it in 2-window mode. So I've got 2 screens here where I can see my documents, and I can scroll through these documents in these 2 screens. And we've got a space over on the left where we have 2 areas for organizing documents. And so you can see what we're looking at here is a case I took to the tax tribunal last year. It was a case on permission to appeal, so we had to get permission to bring the case because we were late. And this is the hearing bundle I took into court that day on an 11-inch MacBook Air. So it's quite not much screen real estate I had that day. And you can see what we had in it was a whole bunch of different documents. So this is a sort of typical situation. We had 27 different documents of court evidence. We also had a separate bundle of witness statements, and we had a bundle of authority. So a whole bunch of case law, you know, from all sorts of Supreme Court down, and a whole bunch of legislation. Tax, I'm afraid I deal with a lot of legislation. And you can see what I did in here in Casedo is organize all these documents into the right order and mark them up with various highlights, with bookmarks, so I can jump to specific parts, and with links, etc. So that's an example of what Casedo can do. It can bring all your documents together for in this case, court advocacy. But I use it for a lot of different things. I mean, another example, if I jump back here, is here's a piece of work I was asked to do. Obviously, there's some work I can show you, which was a simple piece of research on the PAYE and NIC regulations. And so here was simply a question of wading through a lot of legislation and trying to figure out what it was all about. A bit of guidance, but mostly just some very tedious technical tax legislation. So it can be used as all sorts of things. I mean, another example, I had a piece of advice to do on what counts as entertainment expenditure under the tax law, and I brought in a whole bunch of different resources. So here we had a lot of government guidance. We had the bar manual because it related to barristers, and we had, again, case law, etc. And you can see how what I can do with this app is build a collection of documents that I can look at and move around fairly swiftly. So hopefully that gives you does that make sense, Gizem? Anything else?
Oh, no, this is brilliant, but how can we use this exactly for students?
In exactly the same way. What I'm going to do, Gisette, you sent me over yesterday a whole bunch of documents about, so what I'm going to do, let's work through that as a case study. I'm going to create, let's look at the problem you sent me. We've got some more, letting a few more people in. So yesterday, Gizem sent me one of her old essay questions. And so let's see how we might approach that, you know, a real student assignment with Casedo. And the starting point is to create a new case file. So Casedo works by creating a new document, which you store on your computer wherever you like. That's a document like a Word document that you can save, you can copy it. So let's call this one student webinar. And save it in a folder on my computer. In this case, I'm using OneDrive, which is where I store a lot of my documents. And you can see what you start off with is a completely blank space. So if I was approaching a student question, the first thing I would do is import into this Casedo file the question. In this case, it's a Word document that Gizem sent me. And here it is. And it appears down in the desk space. Now, the idea of the desk space down here is that it's a space where where documents arrive and they're unorganized. And it works exactly, we got what we call the index up at the top and the desk space down at the bottom. They work in exactly the same way. And I can move this file up into the top, no problem. and view it up there. I can move it back again. The concept here is that you can have a nicely organized space where you know where you're putting things in a nice tidy position, and you can have a disorganized space down here at the bottom. So it's really more of a conceptual difference rather than a practical one. We call it the desk space because the equivalent is, you know, someone opens your door or you go somewhere and you dumps a load of papers on your desk, and you've got to figure out what they're all about. You've no idea where to put them yet. You can't file them immediately. First, you've got to figure out what they are before you can do anything with them. And then you can build something nice tidy. So what we've got up here is a Word document that came in, and we've got some questions. So which one should we do, Gizem? Doesn't matter.
Let's do the first one.
The first one? Okay, brilliant. So I can just select that text there and give it the highlight color. I can change that color by clicking on it. So again, it's immediately, and I can delete it. So immediately you can just pick out relevant information. That's the first. Active reading is really key to my practice as a lawyer. Whenever I have to read documents, I make sure as I read them, I mark them up and constructively. So it's an investigative process. And I might even, for example, drop a bookmark on this so I can say, question 1. Just to sort of pick out, not particularly useful, but you can see how I do that by dragging this bookmark tab onto the document. And what that does is in the top left, it drops a bookmark marker under that document name, which means I can...
if we delete that bookmark, can we delete it?
Yeah, you can just select it and press delete, and you'll be asked to delete it. So I can delete that very simply. So there we go. We've got our question. To what extent has the tension running through landlord between land as capital and land as a home been resolved? So I hope really you're not going to push me on this one, to them. My landlord is rusty. But fortunately, you provided some materials for me to look at. So the thing I would probably do in this question is go, and the first thing I'd probably want to look at is my lecture notes. Is that how you would approach this?
Yeah.
Of all the things you send me, you can see here on my screen some articles, legislation, an answer. We'll avoid that for now, some books and stuff. The first thing I would do would be to go to my lecture notes. And in fact, I would probably, if I was back at school now, have a land law case file with all my lecture notes already in it as a sort of master document. So here I'm going to import all those, and I'm going to create a folder just by clicking on this folder button called lecture notes. I'm going to put these documents in it. So let's drop all those in there. And pop that up there. Oh, I missed one. I can put these in whatever order I wanted. I imagine registration would have come first. You can rename them if you want. You can put numbers on them, for example, if you wanted to put them to name them for some reason, or just to change the name. Co-ownership mortgages. That's a fairly sensible order for those, if I remember correctly. And so here I can now begin. In fact, I can leave that question up. And you see the way I've got two windows here? So these two windows are color coded, and it allows me to look at two different documents or two different parts of the same document at the same time. So if I click on this, you don't actually look at a document by clicking on the name, you look at it by clicking on one of the circles in the tram lines. So if I bring up that document there, I can see the green one in that, and I can equally let's look at those two side by side. Let's bring that one up in that window. Let's bring them both in the same window. And what you're looking at here is it's not opening the document again. It's just looking at the same collection. So for example, if I bring the same document up in the same window and I highlight here, you get the same highlight on the document. So anything I do, if I drop that question 1 again, it's mirrored in both. And you can also see how as you scroll down through that first document into the second document, you literally they've been joined together. And you can see as I scroll down in the left-hand index there, the purple lozenge follows me as I go through. So there's a plane flying overhead. Am I being drowned out by the sound of a jet engine? Anyway, tell me if I am. So you can see how this sort of joins them all together. And it's as I say, it's designed to, the concept is that when you don't look at documents in isolation, and when you're reading things like lecture notes, you want to have them all in front of you, not having to open and close them up separately. So we got our lecture notes here, and I might say, okay, well, this question, mine, what are the issues that are key to this question. Gizem, help me out here. What are we looking at? Concept of...
So we're looking at the concept of land as capital and then discovering the land as home. So probably looking at the legislations that makes a land a capital.
So we might go land a capital. We've got obviously mortgages are going to be relevant. I might drop a note. And you see the way I've done this, I've just, let me delete that and show you again. You've got this tool. In fact, I'm going to close this second window because you don't always want two windows open with Casedo. Sometimes you just want the space. I'm going to zoom in a bit closer. You can see in these two, I've got these tabs. I've already shown you the bookmark one here. If I want to add a comment to my document, I've got this tab at the bottom right, and I can drag that up and drop it on there next to the text. And as I say, I can say there's so capital. I might say notes, mortgages are going to be relevant to that. And mortgage rights are very, very important. Leases, because of the way they're tradable, etc. I know a few things that probably best put. And in terms of the question of a home, you're going to have things like proprietary estoppel. If I could spell that, but I can't.
As well as co-ownership.
Home ownership, yeah.
Co-ownership.
Co-ownership, exactly. Co-ownership. I think occupation is going to be a key concept, and how that influences the rights of a house owner, whether or not they're in occupation. And you might, for example, have busyness versus homes. Like, does it treat business, property, and occupation different? I don't know. I'm just brainstorming. But you can see how, if I was having a question like this, I might immediately drop a note down there and try and break this question up into the different things I'm going to have to look at. And then I can turn to my lecture notes. I might bring back a second screen and go, okay, well, let's look now in here in my lecture notes and see what we can find. So co-ownership, for example. Here we go. We can look at our lecture notes and we can see. That's funny. Got a joint. We might, for example, the right of survivorship might be a relevant issue. If it is, we could highlight that and we could drop a bookmark on that bit. Survivorship, and this is designed to be a sort of flexible system where you can just break down something like some lecture notes. So you might, all the tenancies in common. You might want to bookmark that as well. Let me, in fact, just copy and paste that into the bookmark name. So you can see how I can add these. And over here on the left, you can see under my lecture notes, I'm getting bookmarks on the relevant passages. I don't know. Another way you could approach this is thinking, okay, let's look at occupation as a concept. And if I search, one of the things Casedo gives you is a universal search, where it will search all the documents in your bundle. All the documents you brought in can be searched together. So if I go up to that search field and type occupation, what that will do is it will scan through the entire thing and show me only 6 results for occupation. That's interesting.
Sorry, can we search texts that are photocopied?
So you mean scans in?
Yeah.
No. So Casedo does obviously bring in digital documents. Most of them these days I deal with created on computers, and so have. So I've just got a new, and so have text in them, and you can search them, you can highlight them. If you've got a scan, and in fact, sometimes I find this with older case law as well. When you've got a scan of a document, obviously it's just an image, with just an image, you can't search it, you can't in fact highlight it, you can't even copy and paste out of it, which I'll come to in a minute, the way I copy and paste out of Casedo into a Word document when I'm writing an essay or something. And so you really need to have in Casedo documents that have machine readable text in it. Now, that we do that through a process called OCR, and there's lots of tools for that. Casedo has its own built-in, however. If you right-click a document, so say I had a case in here that was just a scan, I could right-click it and select recognize text, and that will convert that document into machine readable text. And it's not fast, but it does the job really well, and that way you can search for particular words. So I was on occupation. Yeah, so if I hit occupation, if I hit enter, I will jump to the first result there. This might be interesting. Proprietary right, an actual occupation gives the right of an overriding interest. So that's probably a key principle for looking at this distinction between homes and assets. The special treatment that is given, the occupation gives rise to. And you can see, so I drop that by in that land registration notice, and I can now jump to that passage very easily because I put a bookmark. And you can see how this, you could get as carried away with this as you wanted. You could be adding cross-reference, more notes on the side. You could be highlighting in lots of different colors. Because I'm mostly doing actual disputes, I normally use a color coding system where I use, yellow for an interesting point, green that goes for me, and red for things that go against me. But obviously in an essay context, that dynamic's probably not so relevant. And you can, okay, well, so let's say we've done all that. We marked up our cases. We found out the interesting bits. You can see how easy these are to drop in. You might go, oh, we want to mark up where the case is, enterage, etc. And we've now read our notes and found the relevant passages that are interesting to us. And we think, okay, well, let's move on. Next phase. Where would you turn to next? The books, the case law?
This is where I bring in the case law. Yes.
Case law. Okay. Well, you've sent me a file usefully of cases. Where would you normally get these from?
Westlaw and LexisNexis.
Yeah, me too. So you can see that import a bunch of things. And I always have a folder called cases. I always have a folder, and let's add it now because I always have this legislation. 2 folders there. And I'll put the cases in here. And we've got them not all brilliantly named, so we can have a look at what they are. Okay, Santley v. Wild. Santley 18. You can be as diligent or not as you are about these. I sometimes get quite anal and make sure I have everything perfectly named. Other days, less so. And this is a case about, what is this about? We might want to search for the name Santley. And drop through, and actually, so it's not mentioned in your lecture notes. There we go. That's interesting. Move on to the next one, Bank of Ireland. We can add the date to that because I always think that's useful. What's your sort of no, not 200. It doesn't. And we can now sort of organize it. I would probably organize these into chronological order. You can just drag them around, put them in order, give them their full names. It's funny, I remember some of these cases from my landlaw lectures. Oh, excuse me, my battery's about to die. Why is that not? There we go. So you can go through and you can obviously mark up these cases in much the same way as you would your notes. So, for example, I would normally, when I'm marking up a case, find the beginning of the judgment, which is not until where's the freaking judgment start? Lord Wilberforce here. Because actually, that's where the interesting stuff starts. So I've now got we can now don't have to wade through the whole of that case every time I turn the actual judgment. And then you'd find the relevant bits. In fact, as I say, let's go back and look for Glyn in our lecture notes and search for Glyn. And we can see here, we got a reference to the Glyn. So this is about actual occupation. And we don't have a paragraph number there. But what I'm going to do is pop a bookmark there, drop in that question, dent in a bit with some dashes, and I'll show you the linking tool because this is a really one of Casedo's cleverer bits, if I do say so myself. So I've got a reference here to a case, and I've got the actual case. So what I'm going to do is add a cross-reference, and that's this a third of these tabs up in the top left. This tab up in the top right, I could drag down onto the page and release. And what that does is add one end of a link to my page. And the other end is waiting for me up in the top right corner. So I can now go to that case. I mean, I'm already on it here, but I could go and find it, or I could. And do you want to put it? Let's put it by the judgment itself. So, or yeah, let's put it by the judgment. So I can now drop the other end of this link onto the page to create a UE link.
Oh.
And what that creates is essentially a portal between those two parts of my bundle. So next time I come across Williams and Glynn's Bank, you know, say I'm looking at something else and I'm looking through my notes and go, okay, Williams and Glynn's Bank, oh, brilliant, I can jump straight to the case. Or in fact, if I want to bring up this link in the other window, I can drag it into the other window and then see them side by side without moving away from where I was. So it's a really powerful tool for cross references. I mean, to take you back to that case I was showing you in the beginning, what I do when I'm actually doing like in court advocacy, I've got my skeleton argument here, which is obviously the document that is the outline of my case, and I put links next to all the points I was making. So if I had a point about some no further correspondence was set, well, I've got here a link to that evidence.
I actually have a question from Jessica. He says, can you cross-reference between more than 2 points?
You can add as many of those as you want. Let me jump back into our student work. So say I wanted to jump to this case, I can add another one. I could add 3 of those, and then I could, let's see if we've got any other mentions of Glynn's Bank. No, we don't. But I could add those to, that place and that place. So each link is itself two-way, and obviously it's not 1 point that links to multiple places. It's 1 point that links to another because it has to be reversible. But you can add lots of those to the same page or same document. So they're very flexible. And in fact, if you add one to a place, you can delete it and you can see it sits up there. And in fact, if you're, for example, if you were in a lecture and you wanted to just drop some markers, it's actually quite a good way of dropping markers when you don't have time to sort of, I don't know, put in bookmarks properly. You can just kind of drag this down there to almost like sticking your thumb in the page. And then you can go back to that point at any point. But the link actually works even before you finished it, which kind of can have some innovative uses. Let me tell you that. So yeah, cross-reference is really useful. And they're part of that thing in Casedo where, like, what really frustrates me is when I found something and I go, I read a question is asked, and I go, oh, I remember I looked at something that made that point, and then you found it yesterday, and then 2 days later you come back to it and you've got to find the damn thing again. Casedo, sort of part of the whole point of it is to eliminate that having to look again for something you've already found. If you look for something, it leaves the markers on your trail, like the breadcrumbs, and you'll be able to get back to that stuff. So by the time every time you read a case, your interesting point, you go, oh, this is drop a bookmark, relevant, right? And it drops a bookmark down there. So if you ever think that's important, I might want to come back to that. Drop a bookmark on it, and you get a list of it. And I'll show you, one of the great uses of that is legislation. So I don't know whether. I remember when I was a student, I would generally avoid reading the legislation if at all possible. I don't know if you feel that way. You sent me
I can avoid reading everything.
So. But especially land law. I mean, it's not as bad as tax law, but
it's still quite bad. We have another question from Augustine. He says, can Casedo incorporate graphical elements example to show the relationship in land law?
Casedo currently can accept into it only PDFs and Word documents. Probably images will be our next format. We're trying to expand that repertoire as much as possible, but obviously anything can be turned to a PDF, just as like you can use the print command. So if you've got an image that you want to bring in here, yes, you can bring it in, and it will show up as a picture. And you can add cross references to that. You can add bookmarks to it. You can add comments to it in exactly the same way. I'm just trying to think if I've got an example to hand. But yeah, there's no drawing tools or building graphical elements in Casedo as yet. We want to add a freehand writing tool quite promptly, and we will do. But no, for the moment, you can import anything that turns to a PDF, which is basically anything. Yeah. So legislation, back to legislation, I know, much more boring. Let's say, you know, we wanted to bring in, you know, the key legislation and put it in order. And, you know, start off with the Law of Property Act, 1925. And the thing about this is that this is, right, the Law of Property Act is a big act. If I turn on pagination, we see it starts at page 43 of my bundle and goes all the way down to page 263. So we've got 220 pages of the Law of Property Act, which is more than anyone wants to have to look at. But with Casedo, I generally do bring in whole chunks of data. I mean, the tax acts are often like 1,000 pages. So I normally bring in parts of the tax acts, you know, part 1 or part 2. But the other acts are generally shorter, and I'll bring in the whole thing. And you bring in large chunks of legislation, and that you wouldn't, if you were dealing with paper, you wouldn't carry around the entire Law of Property Act in order to answer this essay question. But because you're working digitally and in Casedo, you can, because it doesn't matter that it's long. Because what you do is you simply search for. So what are the any bits spring to mind, relevant sections you want to look for in this act, Gizem?
We can look at section 179.
179. So if I go to the search thing and type in 179, hit enter, I can jump straight to section 179, copy that and paste it in, right? And that drops, as you see before, a bookmark on that section. And so now I don't, every time I want to look at that section, I can just click and go straight to it. I can bring it up next to different things. I can do what I want with that.
Can we paginate our documents individually, separate from the other ones?
Pagination, yeah, interesting how much you guys in school care about pagination. There's good, really clever pagination features in Casedo, but so they're, you know, for court bundling. So yes, you can do quite a lot of things with pagination. Normally, the way it works is that you start on page 1, the first document in your index here, and it paginates all the way down. So as we go through into the other documents, through these lecture notes, it's paginating them all the way through into the cases. And we've got, you know, this bundle is a fairly modest 418 pages. You can do various things with pagination. So say you don't want to paginate your first document, you can right click it and say do not paginate. And what that will do is just take the pagination off. So now page numbering starts on the second document on page 1. If you want to paginate something as an insert, so which means you can, which means you give it a sort of point number. So what that document there, it now, which is after page 10, is now page 10.1, all the way through to, and that whole page 11 will now be the next document, the next lecture note. If you want to restart the pagination, you do a thing called, you toggle the pagination type and go to what we call AB pagination. And what that does is it takes every folder, gives it a letter, and restarts the pagination on those pages. So now we start A1. This one is still an insert, so it's A10.1, but then the legislation starts again at B1. So if you wanted to have a specific restart for specific documents, you'd have to put them in individual folders at the top level. And, you know, so you could do it. Yes.
Okay.
And there's various things you can mess around with that. I should say this, say we wanted a subfolder for mortgages in the cases file. So you can put in subfolders and say that was a mortgage case. Let's say Glyn's was a mortgage case. It doesn't restart the page numbering for subfolders. Ignore subfolders for that purpose. So you'd have to put it as a top level folder if you wanted to restart. But you can see how you can just drag this stuff around, and the pagination updates on the fly. It also gives you a sort of go-to page thing. So you can jump to page, you know, B10 if you wanted to. And you can just turn pagination off with this button down here in the bottom left.
We have actually 2 really interesting questions as well. First one, was, can we navigate to our links?
If you mean, no, there's no way to sort of, in your index, jump to your links. What I do is if I think I'm going to want to navigate to a link, I drop a bookmark there as well. So, I mean, often I find, if I've got a section, say indemnity is important to me, I might, highlight the text, drop a bookmark on indemnities, and so I'm just going to zoom out a bit, and drop a link, and have a comment. Type properly, which I can't, and do all that stuff. Use them all together in sort of concert. Sorry, dragging the wrong thing. So you can use the two things together. If you want a link to be bookmarked, add a bookmark, and it's literally just drag and drop quite easily.
Okay, and the second question is from Jessica. Is there a space limit with the amount of documents you can upload?
No, is the short answer. But it's machine dependent. So what Casedo is doing is building up a PDF it's a virtual PDF in the background, and that can become quite a large document, and it can slow down your computer if your computer can't handle it. I have some bundles that are 5,000, 6,000 pages. So that's, I find with my computer, which is a sort of fairly decent MacBook Pro, that's reasonable. It still works well. It's still quicker than paper, but you do have to sort of be a bit patient with it once you get to those large bundle sizes. Most of my cases are sort of 1,000 to 2,000 pages, including legislation. So that's all fine. I mean, how does that sound? I'm trying to think. There's an element, obviously, if you wanted to have, you might want to have one case file for your entire, like for land law, where you put everything related to land law into one case file. In fact, I'm pretty much sure I would do that. I would create, I'd have one where I'd bring in all my lecture notes and cases. I might sort of pool them and have subfolders for different types of cases and stuff. Maybe up to you. But you can do things like you can copy them. So if you save a case as something else, you could copy a case, delete stuff you don't want, and repurpose this information. So I, for example, I have cases on like procedure in the first tier tribunal. I have a case file for that subject. And when I come across the procedural issues, I can just import all that, choose the bits that are relevant to me, and delete. So.
Okay. One more question before we start. Does Casedo have a file sharing capability, like an online doc? This is really a really good question.
Not like a good, no, it doesn't. We plan to add that, the ability for two people to work on the same bundle of documents at the same time. But at the moment, no. Right, it's like a Word document. So I use Dropbox, and I mean, for example, we as a Casedo business, we use Google Drive. And we share case files on Google Drive, and I use Dropbox for other purposes, and other people can open them and close them. So if I open up this file and I save this, this in fact is saved on Dropbox. I close this down. Gizem, I could give her the link to my Dropbox. She could open this file up and it would look exactly like it does now. She could add documents to it, delete stuff, add comments. I could then come along later and open it up. I could read her comments. And that sort of thing. So we haven't yet sort of got to the phase of our development where we're hitting collaborative tools specifically. We've got some great plans for them, but you can do quite a lot with it, just in that old-fashioned sense of like sharing documents. Because we took a decision quite early on. Look, we don't manage your data. None of this is uploaded to the cloud. It's all local. You can do with it whatever you like. If you like cloud storage, great. If you old-fashioned and you like USB sticks, you can keep it all there, etc.
Brilliant. And I have personal questions now, not relating to how students use it, but more of can we use Casedo supplemented by other software? Is there software like Westlaw that students can use as well as Casedo?
Well, I mean, yeah, to the extent that, I mean, so the way I work with Casedo is I normally have Casedo open on one screen, or if I'm on a laptop on one desktop, and then I'll have Word or my email client open on the other screen, whatever I'm writing. And I sit there writing in one, and I'll have a Safari window or Chrome or a browser, and I can go to the web. I can interact with my normal resources, online resources, Westlaw, etc. Download the stuff I need, file it, and then import it into Casedo, where I can actually work on it. And then next to Casedo, I have Word or equivalent, and I copy and paste out of my file into my Word document. So you just, normal way, you select text, Control-C, Control-V into your document to paste section. So if I'm quoting legislation, quoting cases, I can easily drop that across. And you can copy and paste from your comments as well if you've written something interesting enough in one of those. So it doesn't we don't have direct integration at the moment, but it's simple enough that it works, alongside stuff very easily and very well.
Okay, thank you for that. And also, I have two more questions. Has Casedo assisted legal professionals during the lockdown?
Yeah. Well, yes, I think so. What we found is interesting, the lockdown, because I think it's going to have quite a lasting effect on how people work digitally. And what we found is that basically the entire legal profession is working from home at the moment. And most of them, almost all of them, are finding that it makes no difference. I've got some friends and colleagues who do a lot of court work, and they have less work on. My work actually hasn't been very impacted, but it hasn't been impacted either in the sense I don't have less of it because tax just sort of rumbles on regardless. But also in my case, it hasn't been impacted because I work digitally. I work with Casedo, and so all my cases are there just as they've always been. And I've moved home, and I'm now sitting on my laptop at home as opposed to in my chambers. But I've got all my data with me, and I can open up my case file from a case I was working on 3 months ago, and it's exactly the same as it was when I was working on in chambers. So what we're seeing, I think, in the profession is people having to upskill to learn these tricks about how to work effectively and digitally, because they don't have back in chambers there's clerks who will print. Oh, can you print off 400 pages to me and put it in a folder and tab it? And I don't work that way, but I know people in my chambers and other chambers who do. Law firms have whole departments for printing out stuff and circulating copies. So people used to be able to do that. They don't have that at home. They're having to figure out ways. And to begin with, they've defaulted to the PDF, and Adobe Acrobat is your main tool of working. But I think there's a growing community of people who are realizing that you can be smarter than that, and that having some simple tools like Casedo can really fast track. I was talking to a judge the other day who was commenting how, rather disapproving way about digital trials, online trials, which are it's a huge experiment going on essentially now with online trials and online advocacy. And one of the things the judge said is the problem is that you've got to allow more time for the trial because it's slower, because people take so long to find their documents because they're working on a screen, which struck me as odd, because when I'm working in court and digitally, I'm constantly waiting for everybody else to find the documents, because I've got search, I've got everything one click away. So I can refer a judge to a case. I showed you before in that my skeleton argument, I could show that document, click a button, and I'm there. And then I have 30 seconds whilst the rest of the courtroom shuffles around trying to find their case. So these kind of skills for working effectively and are I think, for you as students, I think you should probably be really valuable skills. I've been talking a bit in universities about the value to lawyers entering the profession of being switched on and aware of how to work digitally. Because I think they're going to be, even before this crisis, I thought those are going to be valuable skills that you as lawyers entering firms, entering chambers, are going to be valued for if you've got them. Being the person in the room who understands how to share docs and mock up and all that stuff. I think that's going to be even more true now. Sorry, that's a bit of a rambling answer.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, but we also have a question from the audience again. Hugh said, what happens if the imported documents are modified externally? Does it update automatically in Casedo, or do we have to re-upload it and redo the highlighting in Bookmarks?
You would have to re-upload it and redo the highlights. Casedo is not yet, we're working on a system for that. It's complicated because obviously how much the document updates will, for small updates, in fact, there's a sort of backdoor way you can do it for small updates. You can replace the document. If you dig into the file, don't try at home, you'll probably break your case file. But so we've been thinking about implementing that through an option. The risk is, of course, that if you've got lots of changes, all your markup just ends up in the wrong place. So not much point importing documents unless it's very smart. And I think it goes to that point that Casedo is it's not about documents that are work in progress. It's about, as I say, which is why I so often use it next to Word, where I'm writing something over weeks and documents coming back and forth in Word. Casedo is where I have my evidence, my static docs, the authority, the evidence, the instructions, the questions you set, and that's its purpose, really. So it's so no, but yeah, not really the problem some people think it is.
We'll wait for the next update then.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we're updating all the time. We hope to have a new update out even this week. Fingers crossed. We get from the developers, which will allow you to do some better things with exporting your bundle to PDF. So if you're building something and you need to send it to somebody else who doesn't have or won't use Casedo, you can send out a PDF, which will be properly bookmarked, etc. for that.
That's brilliant. And I also have a question concerning has students used Casedo before? Have they used Casedo in practice, assisted by you? For example, has there been any kind of like competitions or meetings with Casedo?
Yeah, so we ran a moot last year, our first Casedo paperless moot, which was very successful. Where basically it was actually it was a landlord moot on sort of a family dispute, but actually quite relevant to this essay you've given me. We ran a moot on that subject, and which everyone had to use Casedo to submit their bundles. It went very well. Yeah, so we've had some students using it there. Obviously, we've got a lot of professionals using it for all sorts of different types of work out in the the practicing sphere. I think we've even got some students using it in a non-law context, which I think is which is something I've always thought is very key to what Casedo is for and what it does, in that it's not, I mean, look at it, there's nothing specifically legal about it. I use it, for example, for board meetings when I'm a governor of my kids' school, and they dump it on me before every meeting, 20 documents attached to an email. I just chuck those into a Casedo file. I can organize them in 5 minutes, and I've got my papers for the meeting. Nothing to do with law, just very useful. I even used it for like holiday insurance docs, just to have them all in one place, So you can use it for all sorts of things, and we're beginning to see a little bit of that in the student space as well. So not just for lawyers.
Yeah, I've actually been using Casedo for my assignments as well. And I think it's really brilliant because you get to like highlight, you get to take notes, you get to like link between your notes. It's really brilliant, yeah. So I think we answered that question. I also had a question in mind to ask you whether how technology assists. How do you make most of your the technology to assist your practice? But I think we answered that as well.
Yeah, I think you just got to know your tools is the answer, and find a way that works. I mean, I come across quite a lot of legal technology that's not very flexible, that makes you work in a very specific way, and I abandon that kind of thing very quickly. Bizarrely, I think what we do as lawyers is you mostly you don't know what you're doing when you start out. You get thrown a question, whether by a lecturer or a teacher or a client, and by definition, no one knows the answer. It's very hard to sort of go into that with a rigid structure as to how you want to work, and of course, everyone works differently as well. So I look for tools that are flexible and simple, because then I can make them work for me rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Okay, and we have 2 questions as well, but I think we answered the first one. Is it useful for law students? The answer is yes. And would you like to take it from there, or should I ask?
Yeah, I can see them actually. So non-law students, yes, I think it's very useful for non-law students. I mean, you're writing an essay on history. Anywhere where you've got resources that are teaching you something, or you're relying on in order to condense, and you've got to analyze stuff and find the important information in a bunch of wider materials. Casedo is useful. What is the plan for making this available for students? Well, the personal subscription at the moment is the way it's available. Is a 30-day trial and a £12.50 a month sign up. We're working on a student discount plan, and also we're working with universities to hopefully sort of make it available through universities. Hopefully get the unis to pay for you guys to have it. That would be the better way around, I think, for everybody. So ask your universities for it, and then we'll get in touch. I mean, seriously about that. If you think you're interested in using this, and there's a group of you at a school who would like to have this available for the school, let us know. Get in touch with us. I mean, I'm Ross at Casedo.com, and point us in the direction of the university, and we'll make them an offer they hopefully can't refuse. But until then, you've got a 30-day trial and you've got a personal subscription. And because you've attended today, I think the setup is you get an extra long trial license, I think 6 months or something. So that'll hope you tide you through the lockdown at least.
Yes, hopefully, yeah. So, yeah, my questions are...
That's it? Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks, Gizem. That's been really interesting. I mean, I haven't, we've been talking about such much more interesting stuff than like the boring features that Casedo can do. I haven't taught you through how to cut up documents and do that. But Casedo it's got quite, again, simple and powerful tools for cutting up documents and for adding tables of contents and things like that, we haven't talked about. But we've got resources online. Hopefully you can look at the other videos if you want to know more about how to actually use it. But give it a try, have a play. We're really interested in your feedback as students, because obviously this is a journey that it's very much a work in progress, Casedo, and a journey. I've got lots of ideas about how to make it better, and we are very, very interested in feedback from our users. We're very interested in how to make this available for students, particularly in a way that is going to be useful. So do feed that back to us as you go. With that, of course, it's been almost an hour. I won't be really thank you, Gizem, for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for your very interesting questions. And do have a play with Casedo and get in touch if you've got any questions at all. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Gizem.